Welcome to the Australian Business Executive Podcast, where we speak with Australia's most influential industry professionals on the business and economic development issues taking place across the country. You can stay up to date with all our content, including our magazines, podcasts and videos by visiting www.theabe.com.au and clicking on subscribe.
Today's guest is Lawrie McKinna, CEO of the Newcastle Jets. Lawrie has been involved in Australian football for more than 30 years as a player, coach, and administrator. He was the inaugural coach of the Central Coast Mariners, taking the club to the A-League Grand Final in the 2005-2006 season, as well as in the 2007-2008 season, where the club were also crowned premiers. The popular local identity then turned to a career in politics, serving 4 terms as mayor of Gosford City between 2012 and 2016. He's been the catalyst for the Jets' resurgence and fairy tale 2017-18 Hyundai A-League season. Lawrie, thanks for joining us today.
No, pleasure, Jess.
So, at the beginning of last year's A-League campaign, you penned a letter to our publisher column for us outlining the changes that you were going to undertake. With last year's appearance at the Grand Final, these changes have obviously worked. What's been going on behind the scenes for the last season or two?
So we came over the club like 2 years ago in June 2016 when Martin Lee bought the team, and I came in as the CEO. So a lot of people say, what happened last year? He's done really well, but the planning actually started the year before. When we came in, the squad we had, we knew it wasn't good enough, but 95% of the players were contracted, so we were basically stuck with them for another year. We got rid of Scott Miller, the coach. It never worked out with Scott, so he left. Mark Jones came in just before the season, a local Newcastle coach. He was my assistant coach in China. And up until the last 6 weeks of the season, we were in round about that finals contention, which the club wanted. But the last 6 games, we dropped off and we finished bottom. But a lot of the process had already started. The next season, obviously, we brought in an experienced coach, Ernie Merrick, Australia's most experienced coach. And he came in and walked in the dressing room and got that immediate respect that we needed. We had already started rebuilding the squad, and Ernie came in and finished off that rebuilding. And the season just went leaps and bounds. You know, we had a training day where one of the local companies, Momentum Business Development, they came in and we actually set goals. The team actually set goals, but not just the team, the football staff, administration staff, and the team. It was the first time the 3 bodies had all got together, because a lot of football clubs, you've got a football team and you've got an administration team at 2 different venues. Last year, we moved our offices out next to a training venue at the university, and that's the best thing we've ever done, because we're a club now that everybody, coaches, admin, staff, players, everybody's in the same building, and it's a great environment to be in. And so I will apologise for any noise in the background, because they sometimes sound as though they're having a party in here. But those things that get put in place and setting goals for the players, that was a big thing, because we kept it pretty quiet. But the boys actually decided at this meeting that they were going for at least second spot, and at the finish up, that's what we got. So, but easily it could have been the winner. But it wasn't. But it was a fantastic season. But the work started 2 years ago, and hopefully this year being the 3rd season, we'll continue on. We've already re-signed a lot of our current players, extended contracts. So we're in a really good space when it comes to squads, because too many times in the past, Newcastle Jets and many other teams, after a successful year, they've not renewed contracts and they lose most of the players. But we're managing our player recruitment very well.
I was going to ask you about that. So, I mean, last year you ended up at the Granny, and the season before that you were Wooden Spooners. So how do you try to gauge your success for the upcoming season?
We said at the end of the season, we've always been classed as a small club, a regional club, but you can't finish second in the league and get beat in the grand final and be classed as a regional club anymore. We have to look at ourselves as a big club, so we must maintain. It doesn't mean we have to win it or we have to be second, but we have to be competitive and up the top part of the table now, because we've set our standards, and the hard thing is, okay, we got there, which was hard, but we need to maintain that now. And because our fans want it, the owners want it, we want it as individuals. We've got goals ourselves that we want to achieve for our own personal satisfaction as well.
And I mean, you've been around Australian football for a long time. Having come into the club, how do you rate the local support for Newcastle, as you said, as a regional club, and what areas would you like to see improve?
Our crowds average over the last couple of years. Our crowds have went up by 25%. Obviously, after the first season, finished bottom. Our membership dropped off a bit, but during the start of last season, we started quite a few initiatives to get people to games, and our membership grew on the previous year. So we're over 9,200 members at the end of last season, and we're looking to get up to 11,000 this year. So our supporters base for a regional team. So us and the Mariners are the two kind of so-called regional smallest clubs. We've got, I think we're about fifth in the table for members, 5th or 6th. So we're doing pretty well there. Last year we averaged 11,500, 12,000 people, which would be in the top half as well. We got up to, for a normal league game, 18,000 against Sydney FC in the run-in for the finals. It was the RAF day as well, with the Jets fly over. Sydney FC brung fans as well, but it was a game where we had Roy O'Donovan sent off and we beat the champions and the top of the table team 2-1. It was a fantastic day. We got 19,000 for the semi-final against Melbourne City, and obviously with the sellout grand final. So we do very well, I think, in crowds, and I think we can get better as well. I think over the last 10 years since the last grand final, there's been a lot of damage done in the town by the club, by the brand, by different owners, and how they respected the community or didn't respect the community. We've changed that around over the last couple of years. The big thing is we must respect everybody in the town. I don't dwell on the past. Sorry.
Do you have a particular opinion on that? Because as you've already identified, like the Jets have been a struggling club for a number of years, both specifically on the table. So have you taken any other learnings from either other codes or other teams in terms of generating that interest through the grassroots?
Oh, definitely. Well, I did it at Central Coast Mariners. We were seen as, when I was a coach, we were seen as the model, the perfect community model. And in my 5 years as a coach and general manager of football for 1 year, we did very, very well, and I was very proud of what we'd done. But when I came in here, I could see that the club, I think, had lost its community roots. We thought, in my opinion, the club, the players, they thought, and it wasn't just the players, it's the club itself thought it was better than what it was. And I often comment and say it was like it thought it was the Man United of the A-League, and it wasn't the Man United A-League. It was a team that had not achieved anything for about 8 or 9 years since a grand final win. And you have to get back to basics. And if you get back to basics, back with working with the community, get back to being respectful to everybody you speak to, because you just never know who you speak to, and get the players out there in the community. And over the last 2 years, the players have done an outstanding job, and everybody at the club. That's for coaches all the way down. And we get emails every week thanking us for what the players have done, or how they've done it, or how they've handled themselves. And that just spreads the word, and it just engages kids, and kids come to the games, parents come to the games, and it's a slow process. But we had to get back, get level-headed, get grounded. And I'm just looking at the Newcastle Jets core values that the boys did last year: be in the game, participate 100%. So whatever you're doing, you do it 100%. Be honest with yourself, always, and that's always be accountable for your actions and learn from your results. Be part of your community. One team, one town. Be an ambassador for the club. And then the last one's be happy and selfless. Life is to be lived, make it fun, and be part of a team. If you're happy at work, you work better. All basic stuff, but that's what's up in our dressing room. That's what's up in our offices. And that's what we believe brought us success, and will continue to do so and bring us crowds.
Football doesn't have the recognition of other sporting codes here in Australia. What do you think needs to change at either a club or governing level to, I'm sure as you would know, it's not really considered on par with brands like the NRL and AFL.
Yeah, so the A-League's been going about 13 years. Before that you had the old National League and the old Phillips League. Whereas Rugby Union and AFL, Rugby League and AFL have got years and years more than us. But participation-wise, we've got vast numbers. We've got more numbers than all the codes. And so that's a real plus. We need to engage more kids, because I think when the A-League do surveys, I think it's like 48% of kids who play at grassroots don't have an A-League team. Not even their own city team, so they don't even know about them. So that's the club's jobs, to infiltrate grassroots football. You're right, like we struggle for airtime. We play during the summer, which is cricket. We're up against cricket, no real other football codes, although there are a small lap over at either end. Then you've come up against the Big Bash now, so it's not a football code, but it's another sports code. So we're up against it, but the average crowds in the A-League, I think, are around about 14,000 by memory across the board. And I think that's ranked about 14th in the world. The German Bundesliga, I think, is number 1. English Premier League's number 2. So 14th in the world is not too bad at football. And I know I look at the AFL last week, 95,000 Collingwood fans. And to compete against these guys are an institution. They've 60, 70,000 members. We're a way off that. It's small steps, but I think at the moment, and this isn't speaking out of school, but obviously there are a lot of negative publicity towards FFA, the clubs, the FIFA, with the constitution and stuff like that. This all needs to be sorted. We can't have that infighting, in my opinion. We need to have the level playing field, get it back. So whatever's going to happen in the next month or so, I think is very crucial. And we don't need to be slagging each other. We just need to be working together and getting the game growing. Because we're a long way behind the AFL, Rugby League, and then I would say it was us in the football codes. But you look, we're a lot of the J-League, the American MLS, when these guys started, they had that steady growth, then they dropped off, and then they came again. And I think we've had that kind of level couple of years. I think we were really the only team last year who grew in crowds. So I think it's time now, when the game gets sorted out at the upper levels in the next few months, whatever the result is, it's going to help the clubs to move forward.
Do you think the FFA dropped the ball a few years ago? I remember when we were doing a piece with Sydney FC and we were speaking with Scott Barlow, and they were expressing that they were quite bullish over the TV rights, because I think they were going to get on 9 or 1 at the time. And then this is when Big Bash came in, and as soon as Big Bash came in, they dominated those sort of Wednesday, Thursday time slots, and it just seemed to really take the wind out of the sails of the anticipation of getting A-League on free to air.
Yeah, because the clubs, the TV deal was locked in for 6 years, and whether it's a good deal or a bad deal, the clubs weren't happy with it. The clubs were wanting more money, as obviously because most of the clubs lose money in the A-League, so they were looking to bridge that gap between breaking even. So they weren't happy, and it was well documented. They weren't happy and aren't happy with what the FFA did with the rights. But obviously, the product has to be good to go on free to air. These guys, they've put Big Bash on, and the Big Bash crowds are great. It's not really a cricket game; it's more of an entertaining game and entertainment. And I know the FFA have been slaughtered over the last couple of weeks because of the brief discussion about maybe bringing music in when the ball's out of play and stuff, and the traditional football fans have jumped up and down about it, saying, we're not Big Bash, we're not this, we're not that, we're football. So I think it's getting back to what our core values is, what we are as a sport, what we believe in, and build on that rather than chucking music on. Like, we, as a club, Newcastle, we won't be jumping, but we've actually had music playing. Last year when we scored the goal, The Boys Are Back in Town was played. That was Ernie's choice. Ernie said, I like that song, and The Boys Are Back. And so that came on after we scored the goal. The fans were quite happy about it. You know, they were jumping up and down and joining in and singing. But stopping a corner to do that, no, what we wanted a bit of interaction by the guy who was the MC on the field to actually engage with the crowd, to get the crowd more involved. So we want some changes, but not drastically, like to start bringing in music.
And so what are your thoughts like? I mean, you talk about getting people to the games and participation, but from what I've seen over the last few years, I don't know if this is an FFA ruling or at the club level, but this it seems to be this continuous decimation of these active support groups who were there, you know, rain or shine. Do you take that into account, or what's sort of the theory behind getting rid of the most passionate supporters of the game?
Well, I think FFA is actually addressing it this year. We've got a CEO's meeting tomorrow, and that's on the agenda. I think, and this is my personal opinion, as Lawrie McKinna, I think FFA were a bit too hard on the active supporters groups. Some of them had to be pulled back into line for one reason or another, but I think it was too hard. I just know at the beginning of last season, 2 seasons, we'd done a lot of work with our squadron, which was the main supporters group. And during that first season, that dwindled away to like 20 people. We had to fence off an area for them. They had to have season tickets. It was all just too hard. And the fans just either never came to games or went and sat with their mates somewhere else. Last year, our 3 supporters groups got together off their own back. They turned up in big numbers in an area that was a general admission area. We got a bit of concern from FFA, and then I went to FFA because I went to a stadium to get them a drum set. But unless you're an official supporters club, you cannot have a drum. So I phoned up Greg O'Rourke for the FFA and said, Greg, I'm wanting to buy our supporters a drum. Are you okay with it? And to be fair to him, he put his common sense head on, as he calls it, and we got a drum set. And the drum set stays at the stadium. It comes out on match day, and we loan it to a supporters group to bring that atmosphere, which has made a big difference. And so FFA, I think, felt they had to ease up last year, and now they're bringing in...
But don't they see how ridiculous this is? Because half of the attraction of football, and especially as this country, is people who don't really follow the game, but they hear about how involved the support base is for the game. So it seems as a bit of an oxymoron to me to have the governing body try to understand how they can get fans to the game while stripping the people who make the game fascinating to view in the first place.
I totally agree. Like, I'm a Glasgow Rangers fan from Scotland. When Western Sydney Wanderers come in the league, obviously I was involved in the Mariners, then involved with the Jets. I would go to the Wanderers games often, and I would I'd watch the game, but I would be listening and watching the crowd because I just loved the atmosphere. It was like being in Europe, South America. It was great. Melbourne Victory fans, great, but they had their issues, the North End and the South End, you know. And you're right. I go there. I want to go, and we've had people last year. We've done a lot of initiatives to get fans to ground. They came to the ground and enjoyed the atmosphere, and they came back. They taken out season tickets, family memberships. Is because they enjoyed the match day experience. Because, you know, and I watch all sports, but I was at Newcastle Knights versus St George a few weeks ago, the last game of the season. 24,000 people at the game, great crowd, great afternoon, great weather, and there was hardly any atmosphere there. So, me as a sports person, I like to go there and be entertained and a bit of a buzz about the ground. They're nothing better than when Newcastle, against Melbourne City, and when we beat Sydney FC, some of the Sydney FC players told their players after the game, the crowd got to them because it made a difference. And people coming there for the first time, if you're a rugby league fan and you come to an atmosphere that's electric and the crowd's right into it and behind it, you're going to come back to that because they are changing the rules to make it easier to bring back active support. We've just booked a date in that we'll get out our fans and our members, anybody interested in getting involved with active support for next season, come along. And, because we want to make sure this year we've got as many people as possible in that Bay 1, making as much noise as possible and making it uncomfortable for the opposition team.
Why is it, because I think it's particular to the Jets, is it not, that you guys, your supporter group is pushed off to the corner as opposed to behind the goals? What's the reason for that?
That was their choice. So originally, and before my time, they went into the bottom right-hand corner for the tunnel. They were in there for a while, and then the fans wanted to go behind the goals, and that's just when I came to club 2 and a bit years ago. We had to put a fence up, so it cost the club about, I think, $15,000 to put a fence up behind the goals, just at that seated area right behind the goals. And we had about 120 members for that area, and you would only get about 20, 30 turning up. We had another faction in the corner called the Champions Chaps, and then we had another faction called the NCL. Last season, the 3 groups got together because basically the squadron disbanded, and the other groups got together, and basically they didn't want any leaders, they didn't want a committee, they didn't want to be registered, they just wanted to turn up, go into Bay 1, because that's where the original squadron used to be in the good old days when the Jets won the league. That's where that's where the home fans were based. So they basically wanted to go back there. It was their choice to go to Bay 1, nobody else's.
So you and I get this. Like, I mean, you've come from a football culture. I adapted, saw it, and bought into it. Why do you think the participation rates for soccer are significant? Why don't you think this is crossing over into people even being lukewarm fans of the domestic league?
Well, we're doing work at the moment with Newcastle University on membership, fans retention, and Dortmund University in Borussia Dortmund. So we're actually we had a meeting yesterday about some of the results that's been found for the surveys they've been doing. So we're actually working on that with Dortmund Uni, who work with Dortmund FC, or Borussia Dortmund, one of the biggest clubs in the world. So we're actually why do people not renew the memberships? Why they only come 3 or 4 games? Why they come to 6 games? Why they watch games on TV? So we're going to get more information on this, and we'll share that with other clubs, because I think it's an important way forward. That instead of us, as me as a football fan sitting as the CEO of the Jets, going, I know why people's not coming, because of this reason. Well, we're actually asking the fans that. So over the next month or so, we'll have a lot of data that we can share that hopefully can address that. But one thing I think A-League clubs have to engage with the grassroots football, because, as I said, I think there was a poll last year, it was like 48% of the young players never had an A-League club, even though they'd one in their city or one in their area. I know for a fact when players go and engage with young kids, 5 to 10-year-old, those kids want to come and watch them. They get to know the players, they feel and touch them, they want to go and see them week in and week out. And I think we've proved that over the last 2 years. That's happening again in Newcastle.
Okay. Financially, we've touched on this. The clubs outside of I think the Victory are the only ones don't make any money. They're not cash positive at this point in time. What is the plan? Is there a definite finish line for when clubs are expected, or could you provide some insights into the revenue models and where these clubs are headed?
Yeah, there's no timetable at the moment. Like Melbourne Victory is the biggest club. They run usually a small profit every year. Some of the other clubs might kind of cross that stage, get close, and then drop off. It will depend if they've sold any players that year and stuff. So the players, the clubs have set up an association. So they've and it's APFCA. So that's the organisation that the clubs all work under. So they've been lobbying the FFA because of the Constitution and many things that's in the press just now that they want change. But one thing that they want change, they want an independent league. They want the A-League to break away from FFA, and that doesn't mean to run independently. It'll be like the English FA, where you've got the English FA and you've got the English Premier League. It's the Scottish FA and the Scottish Premier League. The MLS is separate from the American Association, same as the J League. So the A-League clubs are keen for that to happen next year. Depending on what happens over the next few months, that might happen. It might happen a year after, but FFA are aware of this, and I think they're quite across it, because the A-League clubs feel if this happens, there'll be more revenue coming into the A-League clubs. So at the moment, we get the grant from FFA. The clubs want a bigger grant, because obviously if we get more TV money, we'll get bigger grants. So the clubs feel that if this can happen, that the clubs' grants could be bigger and the losses will be smaller, or clubs could get close to breaking even.
So there's a few questions off of that. So for people listening, they're probably unaware that FFA are actually the administrators or owners of the A-League for all intents and purposes. And over the last year, it's been fairly acrimonious, that it seems, between the clubs and the governing body of the FFA, to the point where I think it was 6 months ago, representatives from FIFA even flew over here to try to break this and come to the negotiating table. What's sort of happening? From what we know, Lowie's come in, starts up the A-League. His son is now the chairman, and there seems to be a real power struggle between the FFA wanting to own it all and the clubs. Is that it in a nutshell?
So Stephen Lowy, so FIFA came out and done a report, and then they sent out another group a few months ago who went back to FIFA and gave them the findings. And the findings are that, and since then, Stephen Lowy has said he won't stand as the chairman of FFA when it comes up late November, but there's an EGM been called, so that's going to happen in the next week or so. So the working group basically want the full of football to have a voice. At the moment, they're basically 10 votes, which is nine member federations and 1 vote from the 10 A-League clubs. So the A-League clubs don't want to take over this. They don't want it. And even under the new recommendations, they would never have the power to take over. But they're wanting the full of football to get a voice and have a truly independent board. So that's what's on the go at the moment. So over the next few weeks, that should come through, that it possibly could be, depending on what happens with some of the member federations, they could vote to support these changes, or a few of them were against the changes, who were supporting FFA. So it'll be interesting to see if these guys still vote with FFA and the move doesn't get through, what FIFA will do, because there then some talk that FIFA will come in and just change it anyway. So the next 2 months is a really important time for football in Australia. Hopefully there's not too much bloodshed. Hopefully it's the best outcome for football and the professional game, and for the women's game and for grassroots football, that everybody's represented at the table. And that's what the main changes are, that everybody will have a representation and can be heard, rather than 9 federations and 1 vote for the A-League clubs.
Is there any fear if the clubs get more of a hold on the league? I've been told, I don't know if this is true or not, that potentially it begins to open up the door to the inequalities that we see in other leagues like the Premier League, where the big city teams get bigger and the regional guys like yourself fall behind. Is there any truth to this sort of potential impact of these changes?
Nah, because the clubs, with the recommendations, the clubs will still not have enough power to do that. But I think what you're getting at, if it goes to an independent league and they take away the salary cap, then the bigger clubs will spend more money and the smaller clubs will spend what they're spending or what they can afford. But when you look at last season, the Jets would have we spent more money than we'd ever done, but we'd have spent about, I would say we would be about 6th or 7th in the spend out the A-League, and we came second. So it's not necessary. You look at Leicester a few years ago, they're one of the smaller spending teams, but they won the league. So, but what you're getting at, the bigger clubs will be able to invest more money into the players group, and on paper you say, yes, the gap's going to get bigger. So that could happen, but it just means the smaller clubs like us have to recruit and manage player development. We're in charge of our own academy now. We've got 5 players now regularly up training and playing with the first team in trial games. It's the best crop we've had coming through. We've got 2 boys in the first team who've came through that academy structure in the last year. It means we have to do teams like us, who we don't see ourselves as a small team anymore. We have to do things better. We have to recruit better. We have to have better coaches in the academy, and we have to bring the best players through as quickly as we can. So I don't think it's going to be necessarily you're going to have Sydney FC, Western Sydney Wanderers, Melbourne City and Victory always at the top. But the spend could be far greater than it is now because they can afford it, and they could be seen as being a gap, yes.
Newcastle and your previous club, the Mariners, were key rivals in what's dubbed domestically as the F3 Derby. What did you feel about making that change to going to the Jets as the rivals, and have you had any feedback from traditional Mariners supporters?
Yeah, well, obviously they were the deadliest of rivals. When I was a coach over the last few years, I think that's kind of settled down a wee bit. Even when I was still involved at Mariners, I just thought there weren't as much hatred in the Derby game because it used to be pretty full on. When I had the opportunity to come here through Martin Lee, the Newcastle Herald run a poll, and it was one of the biggest polls they've ever run. And they asked, was it a good idea that Lawrie McKinna came to the Jets? And 87% of the punters up here said yes, it was a good idea. And I wasn't fazed about it, but when I saw that, I went, you know what, I've got a chance. I've got a chance here. And then when I left, I had offered my services to the Mariners, and I'd offered my services free to help some of their coaches. And I was unwanted, I didn't. And as I said, I was at the World Cup, and I met this woman for the Mariners. She was a fan. She said, I can't speak to you, you're a traitor. And my answer was, what? I'm not allowed to work for a living now. And after I offered my services to a club that I'd done great service to, so I can't work for a living, I can't earn money for my family. Oh, yes, you can. I said, well, that's basically what you're saying. And the woman apologised. But I must admit, the fans on the coast have been different class for me. When I go down to Gosford or Terrigal, it's just welcome back home because I was the mayor there as well for 4 years. And when I'm in Newcastle, I've got the best of both worlds. I cannot thank the Mariners fans or the Jets fans enough for making me feel welcome in Newcastle, and the people on the coast respect what I did for the town and the team when I was there. So it's just I'm really fortunate that it's turned out that way, because quite easily it could have changed. And I could have been hated on the coast, but I was always respectful when I left, and I'll always will be respectful and help out where I can, because the league needs 2 teams from the coast and Newcastle that are competitive.
The places, it's only an hour apart, but do you notice any, cultural or size differences? Obviously, Newcastle is a city where Central Coast is a little bit more, a series of townships spread out. But is there any differences in your opinion?
No, look, the crowd's much the same, because I know the Mariners, it's a big family crowd. So that's quite similar. In Newcastle, there are a lot more history in football, because they've had obviously the mining teams and the Premier League out here for years, whereas the Mariners, Central Coast it was a rugby league town that got an A-League team, and a lot of the fans were not so much the die-hard fans, but they were Central Coast people who wanted to support their local team. So at the beginning, it was a very big learning process, I think, for a lot of the fans. I found out when I came to Newcastle, there are a lot of football history up here through ex-players, the KB United days, and the legacy they left. And you've got your Craig Johnsons, you've got many players who played with the national team. So there were slight football differences. But the background of your crowd, and that was much the same kind of makeup. And up here, they want, and much the same as the coast, I found on the Central Coast and in Newcastle, the town, they want you to give 100%. Even if you get beat, but giving 100% was a big thing for them, and they're very similar in that way, I think.
The Australian League doesn't have the depth of players that you would see in other leagues, and with the Jets' qualification for the Champions League, we've seen this consistently, season after season, of how this can adversely affect a team's domestic season because they don't have the depth of players. What are you guys going to do, or how are you looking to sort of handle this much more vigorous playing schedule?
I was speaking with it earlier today, because I think we go to Perth. We come back and play at home the next weekend. Then we play on the Tuesday night in the Champions League qualifier. Then we play, I think, on the Friday or Saturday night. And then we go, if we win that first game in the Champions qualifier, we go away and play on the following Tuesday. And that's a horrendous schedule. And at that time of year, a lot of teams do drop off because they're trying to juggle a 23-man squad. You are allowed to sign extra players for the Champions League, but obviously you need more budget to sign more players, so we've extended ourselves in the salary cap. We've obviously spent similar to what we did last year, so we can't just keep going out and signing players. So then it's managing your players depending how your injuries are. It's going to be a very difficult time, and we've actually expanded our medical. We've got another physio on now, so we've now got the 2 full-time physios. So we're starting to look at that preparation, recovery. It's very, very important. The sports science side of things comes in now to help us manage players and the loads and the travel, because it's so very well in Europe. The Champions League, you're going to be flying. You could be going to the other side of Europe in 3 hours. You're going to be going from Scotland to Spain in 3 hours or something, or 2 hours for London. So it's a big difference flying 10 hours or 12 hours from Sydney to Shanghai if you're playing a team in Shanghai. So it's the logistics, our organisation will have to be spot on. And lucky, myself, Joe Griffiths, and America, we've had plenty of experience in Champions League in the past in dealing with travelling in Asia, but it's very difficult, and we have to do the best job we can, because we'll not be signing a lot more players because just restrictions and budget.
The last question that I wanted to ask you today was about corporate sponsorship in the game. We've worked with a lot of corporate partners who sponsor this sort of content through the ABE. But for a number of years, it was pretty much corporate sponsors being begged to throw their banner on a front of kit or to be seen in front of a camera. And this is drastically changing, where corporates are now actively getting involved. Can you shed a little bit of insight on how companies are working with clubs to provide value for their brand?
Yeah, our major sponsors, obviously we've got Leadman in front of the shirt. So unless we can get a substantial sponsor, Leadman will stay in the front of the shirt. The Greater Bank's our biggest individual sponsor. They're a community sponsor, so they're a Newcastle bank, predominantly in northern New South Wales, but they're our community partner, and because of the work, they've just signed a new 3-year deal, and that's because they see the work that we do in the community is very important for their brand and our brand. So they're coming on board and getting great exposure and getting great support for the community as well, so that's fantastic. We've managed to get Veolia on board. They've come on board a year ago after we finished bottom of the league, so credit to them. They came on board at a very difficult time. Inspirations Paint, we just announced them. They're on the front of our away shirts. They've just signed up for another 3 years. That was announced last week, so that's brilliant. Joe Goodser and the management team do a great deal out there. They've got great activations. They have over 130 franchises around Australia, and everywhere we go, we've got Inspirations fans supporting us, hopefully, and not supporting the home team. We just got McDonald's on board for the first time. They're on the back of our shirt as well, so it's great that we're actually getting national companies on board, because before that we never had a lot of support at the top end from local Newcastle businesses.
And what's been the change? Why are they interested now, or what have you done to pique their interest?
I think it's just been real, because again, I said before in a different question, like obviously when the Tinkler situation happened in Constantine, these guys spent a lot of money to the club, so it's not bagging anybody, but we've engaged with the business community. We went out and we went cap in hand, and we've tried to right the wrongs that was done to individual sponsors over that time. And now people see that what we're trying to do and what the vision is for the club, and they're jumping on board that. They see that we're getting support, and we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to grow in that. But clubs, the big sponsors are now, and it's still not easy to get them, but we've increased the sponsorship again this year for last year, and we've still got a long, long way to go to even get near what the big city clubs are getting. But we're increasing, we're going the right direction, and it's hard. But the sponsors I've mentioned coming on board, especially Greater Bank, could have finished before. They never. Same as Inspiration Spain, same as Viola. These guys have came on board when the times were tough, and they've stuck through that, and then they've seen the changes in the club over the last 2 years, and they've extended another 3 years. So that's credit to everybody involved in the admin side of the club and the playing side of the club that's made these sponsors comfortable about getting on board with us. And our secret now is to get a few more on board to get closer to breaking even.
Okay. Look, that we've covered quite a lot of ground today. Before we finish up, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, it's just like our club. We want to do the best we can. We want to be the best professional sporting club in Australia on and off the field. And it doesn't mean we have to win every week. It means we have to be competitive and we have to be respectful. And that's while I'm at the club, I'll make sure we do that. If people don't want to buy into that, they can get off the bus. You know, we're on that bus journey now, and if they don't want to be on it, you can get off. But I don't see too many people jumping off, and I see more and more people want to jump on, and I think that goes to show with some of the players we're signing, and we'll make a couple of big announcements next week with some big re-signings of players as well. So I think we're in a good spot. We still need to get more revenue, more crowd, more members. But we really appreciate the support we've had so far for the businesses and for the fans, and we'll hopefully we can go one better this year.
Excellent. Lawrie, thanks for joining us today, and best of luck in the season ahead.
Cheers, Jess.
This has been a production of the Australian Business Executive, a division of Romulus Rising Proprietary Limited. All rights reserved. You can stay up to date with the Australian Business Executive, including our magazines, podcasts and videos, by visiting www.theabe.com.au and clicking on subscribe.